Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to EarthRenew's first ever sales call to discuss our recent news events. Please be advised that this call is being recorded. My name is Carrie McGovern. With me today is CEO Keith Driver and Neil Wiens, our CTO and Head of Sales. Before we begin, I wish to draw your attention to the earnings disclosure, which is available in the presentation on our website. It includes cautionary language about forward-looking statements, risks, and uncertainties, which also apply to today's discussion. After our remarks, we'll be happy to take your questions. In the Q&A chat, we will try to get to as many questions as we can. I'll now pass this over to Neil Wiens, the founder of Replenish Nutrients, who will give us some background on why he started Replenish Nutrients, as well as an understanding of the market opportunity we're taking advantage of here.
Okay. Actually, I'll just let Keith do a quick CEO introduction, sure, and then I can rock and roll on this.
Sure, absolutely. So by way of introduction, before we get to Neil's demonstration, Keith Driver, CEO at EarthRenew. My background is in engineering, and I've been working on developing clean tech and ag tech ventures for the last 20 some odd years. I came into EarthRenew when asked to sort of figure out what the business model could be. And it's really been since the acquisition of Replenish Nutrients that we've really taken on. And so you'll see that my logo says EarthRenew and the other say Replenish Nutrients. We're actually moving towards Replenish Nutrients as the overall brand for the organization, as this is the name we're known for in the marketplace with our products, and to simplify matters that way. So that explains the branding. And over to you, Neil, for your introduction, and off you go with the demonstration on the products.
You got her. Yeah, so I'm Neil Wiens, founder of Replenish Nutrients, largest shareholder now of EarthRenew, and the chief technical officer and head of sales of the merged company. I think as we get going here, for everybody to understand what we're doing is ultimately we've had a lot of news in the press here over the last I don't know, half a year to a year, that fertilizer is fantastic. These growth companies are there, and what we wanted to do was really let everyone on this call know that we're part of this. In fact, we're a lot more. In fact, I think we're way better than them. In fact, not even think. I know we're way better than all these big companies. We're just not that big yet. Hopefully, with everybody on this call, we do get to that point. So that being said, I'll give you a little history of the Replenish side of it all. My background is actually animal nutrition of all things. And that actually holds a lot of importance on this call, because everything that I'm going to talk about is talking about balanced diet and nutrition, and also how we're feeding bug population. So if you think of feedlots as sidebar things, you're always going, okay, what is the largest feedlot in the world? And here in Alberta, we always talk about, of course, the cattle feedlots. And I then generally go into a conversation that says, well, ironically, the biggest feedlot is probably Calgary. It's about 1.3 million head. But then I started thinking about it as a soil side. And if you think about it, my top 6 inches of soil hold over 1 trillion bugs just in a little handful. So that then becomes our largest feedlot. And that then lies really on how we became Replenish. So when I started this about 10 years ago, not Replenish, but my previous company, I invented a product that was elemental sulfur in compost, patented the invention, and later on sold it to GFL Environmental. That's just a small company that some of you may have heard of. And they created GFL Ag. Now, in that, in the subsequent years of being done with GFL and watching how really these new and improved fertilizers can change the way guys farm, the way the soil was reacting, we found that it was a great potential out there that was missing in the ag world that nobody was really taking a look at. So myself and a few of my colleagues started a company called Replenish. At that point, that was about 4 years ago, Replenish began with taking a look at mineral fertilizers using biology to break down these mineral fertilizers at the right place, the right time, forget about waste products that come out of the chemical side of it all, and ultimately, using that top 6 inches to be healthy, do what it needs to when the plant wants it the most, and give us more nutrient dense products. And in that, since 2018, we started with our experimentation and product line. That year we sold $700,000 worth of stuff. I know it's lots, so let's get crazy, right? But what we ended up doing is we had the guys who sat there and said, okay, I think this is pretty cool stuff, Neil. So we turned around, got it out there. They turned around from going a 1/4 of their production, which is 100 and maybe 160 acres, to doing their whole farms the next year. Year 2, we moved to 2.3 million in sales, which was 2019. Year 4, the word on the street started getting heavier. The more guys started using it further on their farms. We added another product line called mineral, being the potash side of it all. And so year 3, we got into about 6.8 million in sales. Up to last year, we were 15 million in sales. So wanted a little bit of background, because what we've done here isn't just a matter of sales guys shaking the bush better and things happening. It's just because the product physically works. We see some really, really neat things inside the soil that makes it better. And ultimately it just turned into almost a freight train, which, because it was myself and my 2 partners funding, I had to come and find somebody that would help us out. And therein lies how I met Keith and the EarthRenew team and where we're at today. So from there, it's kind of just the background. I'm going to get a lot more in depth as we go through the slide on how the products work, how we develop them. But I just thought I'd give you a little bit of a background on where we got and how we got there, and why now we're working with EarthRenew and have become this, what we think is a really great company. Go ahead, Keith.
Thanks, Neil. Carrie, if you want to put up the presentation. I see a question about when you say word started getting out, what were they saying? So Neil, if you want to add a few words to sort of what feedback we get from farmers, what do they like about the product, just while Carrie's putting up the presentation, I get ready to go.
Oh, no, that's great. No, so as far as the word getting out, farming community is interesting. New products don't just take off overnight. And we're going to talk about how we're seeding areas and why we're actually expanding to where we're expanding. But what happens is when you go, in particular from my previous life of the biosol side of it all, we had already developed a market that understood biologically activated mineral nutrients with the biosol. So it was a little bit of an easier step in for me. I didn't have to start from scratch. But the word of all the guys that we originally doing, and right now biosol and that product sells on well over 2 million acres a year in Western Canada. So we already have this background of people who know my story, know our story, and understand the concept of what we're doing. So I think that's the best way of saying the word got out. And the other side is the fence guys start looking over the fence and going, what are you guys doing over there? And it really is as simple as that.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Neil. Carrie, if you want to advance. So want to introduce Replenish Nutrients. We're the leading producer of innovative regenerative fertilizer products, and we're going to break that down. What are regenerative fertilizer products? How does it contribute to sustainable farming? We'll take a moment just to pause on the forward-looking statement slide. Again, this is all online. We'd ask you to refer to it. The information in here is relevant as of May 18th, so as of yesterday. Next slide, please. As far as a company overview, what do? We source undervalued mineral nutrients. We combine them with biologically activated compost, and we create fertilizer products out of them. So we take undervalued products and we turn them into fertilizer products. And right now that's fantastic. How we do it is we both blend them to make a blended product, and picture that as a pile of mixed soil. And then we also take that product and granulate it. And for us, granulation is the key. Our biogranule is hard enough to go through the drill and hard enough to go through the equipment and augers, so it can be stored and managed and shipped. but at the same time is available and retains the biological activity. We don't cook it until it's inert. So that's how we do it. How we're going to grow. Last year we were sold out. We expand capacity this year, we're going to be sold out as much as we can move through our pipelines. We need to grow the size of the pipe. And that means adding manufacturing so that we can fulfill the offtake agreements that we have. As a business, we're effectively built like a toll operation. So we buy our ingredients and we sell them, but the prices are hinged. We're not taking any commodity risk. So we're not looking at taking positions in the market to take advantage of things. We're looking to simply create more manufacturing capacity to fill the orders that we have in front of us in Canada and into the US. Our GHG ESG impact is twofold. On the one hand, we're upcycling nutrients and we're just granulating them, we're cooking them at a low temperature to get them to the hardness that we need. And that has a lower GHG and environmental footprint than the conventional products. So where Agrium and Mosaic are carbon short in their operations, i.e. carbon regulations negatively impacts them and is a headwind for them. For us, it's a tailwind. We don't have that same feedback. The other side is in our granule, and Neil's going to talk about this in a minute, but our granule has carbon in the form of the compost as the balance of the granule, whereas conventional fertilizers have salts. So we're adding carbon back to the soil, and that can sequester material amounts of carbon. We may not get the credit for that, but we're enabling our farmers to achieve that value, and that value passes through the supply chain. So that's what we do, how we do it, the impact we have as we grow. Next slide, please, Carrie. As Neil mentioned, started in 2018, hit the 6.8 million of sales in 2020. We brought them in the EarthRenew family through a merger in 2021, and we immediately hit sales ahead of our expectations. Really, our sales are quarter dependent now because we're doing so much in the blended products. So we sell about 45% of our product gets sold in Q4 because that's the longest period of the year where we can do it. So we're going to see that coming through that great Q4. We're going to see an even better Q4 this year based on all indications, and we're going to see that slow ramp through the year as we move through that facility. How we grow, we brought on the bicycle facility beginning of this year. We'll bring on, we have a planned project to bring on an expansion at a Bolt blending facility to add granulation up there. Again, it's a shovel-ready project on land we already own, facility buildings already in place. And then our project with K+S and Bethune, we just put out a press release that talked about those two projects and where we are, and they're really moving us forward, adding 50,000 tons of capacity in DeBolt, which will double our production, and then adding another 200,000 tons at K+S that'll more than double that again. Our markets that we're serving right now, Western Canada and the north of the US, so across the border, we tend to expand that out over time with a particular focus looking through into places like Colorado and down into heading towards California and some of the specialty markets there, as well as through Idaho and Montana down that path there. So you'll see us continue to grow with relationships like the one we have with Biochar now that'll help pull us in those directions. Next slide, please. As far as highlights, the regenerative fertilizer product target within the current geography, so Western Canada, which is one of the 5 regions of the world that's a net exporter of food, it's a $6 billion market for fertilizers. We're at $15 million of sales last year, 24 to 27 million in sales this year. We've been growing at, call it 200% a year on average over the last 4 years. And we might be slightly lower than that this year at 180%, but it's only because we need to start building bigger and bigger projects. So by the time we get 2 or 3 years out, we'll be back on pace at that 200, and we won't be too far off in the meantime. But it's big chunks of growth, and we're pretty excited about it. The sales are really only limited by production capacity. We have access to enough of the raw materials to get us there. And these projects, these growth projects that we have, drive sales. But because the way our business is set, they tend to keep a consistent gross margin in that 25 to 30% range. So our growth will be accretive. Every project is bringing on that same gross margin. We've done more than enough testing, but we will continue to do testing and put out results periodically. New crops, new partnerships with new stakeholders that can help amplify our message as we go. And then obviously we're going to start measuring and managing and reporting on our impact in terms of soil benefits. Even if they don't accrue to us, they're important to us. They're important to our farmers and our producers, and they're also important to the people who buy the crops from them. And we're looking to see that supply chain comes as the role of regenerative fertilizer becomes more consistent. Next slide, please. So if we look at a map of Western Canada, obviously that, the 77% and what is that, 80, 92% if we consider Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba for production, percent of the arable land is Saskatchewan proper, or Saskatchewan proper. So we've got the $6 billion market. We can expand into a $25 billion market, and we've got unique products that our formulas are our own, and we've developed them and we've proven them in the field, and therefore the test data that goes with them and our manufacturing process that go behind them are our secret sauce and effectively the moat around our business. Our products get to the point of being valuable so they can be shipped internationally. Sorry, Carrie.
Sorry, Keith.
No problem. And because there was a question put up about, what's the impact of the war in Ukraine? Well, the war in Ukraine impacts on potash supply globally. There's very few places in the world that are exporters of potash, and Saskatchewan is being one. And so there's a big draw to move potash elsewhere. And if we can value add that in Western Canada before we export it, then there's lots of value for us as well. So that war has pushed up prices. It has created more uncertainty, and we'll talk a little bit around market channels a little bit later, and we'll talk about how it's impacted on farmers' interest in trialing new products because there's just a lack of supply all around for nutrients. So I'll pass the slides back to Neil and let him speak to the difference between regenerative and synthetic farming and where we fit in that marketplace.
No worries. Just one last piece to the target market. So for those of you who have been, understand organic, farming or that end of things, you probably take a look at it and you're going, well, these guys are just kind of in the same niche, these regenerative people. And so if you've been doing any research on this, you understand that organic farming is about 2% of these acres that we're talking about. We are not organic farming guys. Although we're certified organic, we're not, that's not our target market. And I need everyone to understand that. What is incredibly unique about our product is that unlike any other products that we've seen on the market, as far as regenerative, the majority of them are just a straight, microbe population or another different dust that's going to do, make sure your flower gets bigger or something, right? And so what the really neat thing about our products is the fact that it actually works in synergy with commercial fertilizer products. So we're not scaring farmers away by saying, hey, try this. Let's just take a major risk out there and away they go. But they're able to utilize ours in synergistic ways with their existing farming habits. So our target market, when we put this up and say there's this many acres, it physically is our market. Just wanted to add that to this. Go to the next slide then, Carrie. And if you want to just stop for a second, because I like to use props. I'm a little weird guy this way. I guess part of my introduction here too is as I get moving, through that biochemistry side of it all, is there's a lack of us, and I see a couple on the call here that are other geeky agronomists that I hang out with, and we have some weird conversations on biochemistry, and I'm not going to bore anybody in here with that, but on that I also like to use props. It's one of these things. So just to understand commercial fertilizers, the difference between that and a regenerative fertilizer. So about 70 years ago, we started utilizing commercial fertilizers on a fairly large scale across the globe. And when we did that, it was great. Everything reacted accordingly, and away we go. And I'm going to use phosphorus as a demonstration tool here. So what they end up doing is they take this chunk of rock, and it'd be almost exactly saying this is a phosphate chunk of rock. And companies that like Mosaic or Nutrien physically buy this rock from Morocco or in Florida, where the majority of it is built, and they do a process to it chemically that takes the phosphorus out of this, because the rock itself isn't all 100% phosphorus. it's only about 30%. So then what they do, and I'm going to make this a real quick thing, is what they do then is they take this chunk of elemental sulfur, which again is a mineral fertilizer, but not very utilized in the world of, plants, because it's not in the right form. So what the mining guys do is they burn this chunk of elemental sulfur to make sulfuric acid. They wash this rock with the sulfuric acid, take the phosphoric acid out, have an acid chunk that is good for their process. And then what they do, which is really unfortunate, is they throw the other 70% of all this away. So they throw the other 70% of all of this away, being this one, which if you actually analyze this rock, has calcium, magnesium, iron, zinc, all the stuff that we're taking in our multivitamins in the morning because our food doesn't have enough of it. So you can imagine why our food doesn't have enough of it is because we've been throwing it away. So again, to get back into that balanced diet and saying, okay, what are we doing? So here I now have this phosphoric acid that they've done. The chemicals, the company can't sell phosphoric acid to the farmer, so they need to do a neat little chemistry lesson, which for all of you, I think was in grade 10 or 11. And again, this is the only thing I get people to remember from grade 10 and 11 in this conversation is what happens when you do an acid-base reaction is, and of course I get this acid shirt on, so that's why I did that. So the acid-base reaction is you physically create some heat, is one thing, but the very final piece of it all is you always create a chemical salt. So this is what's very interesting about the commercial side and why our soils have actually been decreasing in soil health is because over 70 years, we've been adding commercial fertilizer, which is always a chemical salt, to the land. And the last time I checked, we're not growing seaweed. So it's a little bit of a problem where we can't, we're causing salinity patches. We all have been hearing about these, and at the end of the day, the majority of the bugs that I'm trying to make happy in the soil really don't like a whole bunch of salt. So there's your overview of what the chemical side. So what does regenerative then do? Is I'm still taking these two pieces of mineral fertilizer, right? I'm still physically doing that. And by doing that, we grind them up, add a compost blend of herbs and spices. So it's mostly fungal background. And we let biology and biochemistry do its thing in a timely release and allowing then for, instead of only the phosphate piece of this rock, allowing for all the nutrients in this rock to be utilized by the plant. That's the overview. Right. Now you can hop onto the slide there, Carrie. So the impact of that is obviously we're not creating a chemical salt when I do that other side of it all. We're using biology. What's interesting, and again, the agronomists on the line will understand it, but in traditional farming, we're putting most of the chemical fertilizer right at the very beginning, right when the seed is in the ground, and saying, okay, you want everything that you need to eat all in one little package right at the beginning of the season. In our case, with regenerative fertilizer, in particular the ones we've invented, is we've managed to create a biological action, which when the plant is at its highest peak of requiring nutrient, that's when the course biology is at its highest peak. So it follows along very nicely. And then what happens is, of course, you get better soil health, you get less pesticide use, you get, obviously sequestration of CO2. And of course, the biggest one that we see in particular in a spot like Manitoba right now, where you're getting floods all over, is we don't get runoff or leaching from any of our products. So those are major, major things. And then the final piece of it all is I can use 100% of our process. So we're a zero waste chemical or fertilizer company versus the other guys being a 70% waste fertilizer company. So go to the next slide, please. Regenerative farming. I'd like to kind of put this on because if you've been researching regenerative farming, You're watching guys like a Gabe Brown out there in North Dakota, who's a very smart guy and does a great job. But what the regenerative guys are promoting is you need 6 cows to walk over this piece of land, and then you need 10 chickens, and then you need a sheep, and then you need to do a cover crop. I'm being a little facetious on it, but it's really ultimately what they're working with. And when we're talking the market that guys are going on, and and we've all heard of the General Mills and the PepsiCos and the McCain Foods all demanding regenerative acre food because of the higher nutrient density. It's physically impossible for us to hit those kind of millions of acres by doing regenerative in that kind of way. So by defining regenerative as just increasing soil health, which is really the great definition, we become that ultimate way of doing this, because even though that I can work with commercial guys, we do increase soil health, and we have 4 years of background, and that will prove that out. We can go on to the next one. Our products. I keep dwelling on the low salt. That has really been what's turned the table here in the last 5 years. I really didn't hear much about the whole low salt or high salt or salt index side of commercial fertilizer, at least not that anybody was worrying about it so much in North American farming until about 5 years ago. So we're in a great spot right now that we're got a whole bunch of buy-in by farmers, by producers that understand that, hey, we need low salt. And that is number one thing. It's basically also the other side of it all is a lot of the fertilizers that we've been putting down on the ground over that last 70 years get tied up in the soil profile if they haven't necessarily leached. I'm not going to go any further into the chemistry, but that's why when we're all of a sudden using and really helping the microbes grow better, we end up activating a lot of we can unlock a lot of that nutrition in your soil. ROI in general, we announced a few weeks ago or 3 weeks ago that we're doing a 3-year ROI trial. And the reason being is you just don't see reactions overnight when you're trying to fix a 70-year problem. However, you do see it over a 2 or 3 year period, and hence the reason the 3-year ROI program. What's interesting when you get a healthier soil, unlike anything with healthier gut biome, is we have the ability to fight off way more disease, and by being healthier, and it just all of a sudden just helps. And there you go. Well, it's a good question. I get distracted easy. My wife always hits me in a hurry whenever somebody puts something up. Then I just go over into another time zone. And away we go. But anyways, Keith Schaefer just asked a really good question on a soil salinity map. There are those that are for Western Canada, and that's a great thing that we can show in the future presentation for sure. But ultimately, what we're sitting there is that soil, that salt action that we're talking. The reason we're decreasing seed mortality is because most of the chemical fertilizers that we're putting right beside the seed, because we've got to, understand that they are only available for a short time. We as producers put it right beside the seed, and if it's too high in salt, guess what happens? We kill them. So when we're using our products, we're not doing that anymore. Okay, next slide. So our lineup of products, we have a suite of products for a reason. Not a one solution fits all, and it never will. I mean, there's a whole, like people, there's a whole bunch of different soils. So for us to actually go in and understand what we do, so we've decided to come up with a suite of products, being our backbone one is Rebuilder, which is the phosphate and sulfur mix. Biosol, of course, I invented it. I still love to play with the thing once in a while. So that's a great sulfur source. And at the end of the day, our HESO product, once we have everything balanced and your biology working fantastic in the soil again, the HESO product works fantastic as a long-term, what would it be? A long-term maintenance ration. Again, I keep using the world of animal nutrition on maintenance rations and everything else. So apologize, but I can't resist. Okay, you can go to the next one. Oh, actually, you know what? Stay on this, Carrie. I just saw, so one thing that we can do that the big guys can't is adding different ingredients to our products. So if we have an area that is low on boron, for instance, we can actually homogeneously put it into our system. It's only going on at a pound per acre. So we can get this at a better active rate than, say, somebody who's just mixing it at the fertilizer plant. Whether it's iron, biochar, or bioinoculants. The bonus of what we're doing is because we haven't got $1 billion of infrastructure and having a straight run line of 1 million tons a year, I can go and have a producer that comes to us and says, well, we need 500 or 600 or 1,000 tons, or a retailer says we need 1,000 tons of this product because it really fits our zone. So we have the ability to actually maneuver and be proactive on different formulations. Hand it over to you, Keith.
Thanks, Neil. So when we look at our business model and how we work, so we source these raw materials and we granulate them, and the spread on that and the blending and granulating of that is where we make our margin, and that margin is, like I said, 25 to 30%. So when we look at our suppliers, we have 3 main suppliers that supply about 99% of our product. The rock phos we get from Fertaz. We helped them open up a mine last year in Fernie, BC. That's close to our site in Bicyker. And the DeBolt project, they've got a mine opportunity up near there in a place called Wapiti. And so we've got this access to supply. We're one of their big customers. We have our offtake in place. For the biosol, which is the sulfur and the compost side of it, obviously GFL is the relationship for us there. Neil's longstanding relationship there and understanding the product, but also it makes sense for GFL. They're in the waste management business. They produce compost and they can mix it with sulfur, which they also manage as a waste product for the oil and gas industry. So it sort of creates that win-win scenario that we're looking for. And then on the potash, we've had an LOI in place with them. We're actually going through final contracts and board approval of those in the near term here. We can take a byproduct, and when we get to a slide on that, I'll be able to speak to that more clearly. But we take a byproduct of their production process, and that becomes the potash source for our products. So they're spending their money to enable us to be able to take that product, and then we're spending in our project to be able to utilize that product to hit the local market. K+S not only serves international markets, so we're providing them with an opportunity to be locally sourced. So for Fertaz, we're helping them open up their mines. We're the lead order that's helping them do that. Biosol, we're helping GFL find value for its compost byproducts. And for K+S, we're helping them become more efficient in their operations by debottlenecking their plant and taking a byproduct into our products, opening up local markets. A very neat way to set ourselves up with our suppliers. Next slide, please. So there's really 3 ways to get product sold in the ag space. And at the beginning, it's a ground game. It's direct to farm. It's Neil, obviously a farmer himself, going out and talking to folks and getting them to trial it, whether it's a quarter section, a strip, or something to try it, and then to become buyers. That's a very intensive way of selling. Pardon me. So we're moving more towards independent ag retailers, where we were once 80% direct to farm. We're moving towards maybe 20% direct to farm, and where that direct to farm is really the largest of our farmers that are out there. They're really sort of their own retailers. And then we work with independent ag retailers to move that product. These are what we call, they're independent, they're agronomy forward, and they're not linked to a nutrient or a mosaic or a Simplot. Their job is to work with all the other products and make those available into the market. And then lastly, as we look towards the US, we're looking and working with some folks out there that are wholesalers that have relationships with the independent ag retailers. And that's what's going to help us scale, where we can go 1-to-1 on with independent ag retailers. The wholesalers can go 20-to-1 on these guys and do the sales and pull in those volumes. So we have that mapped out. The hard part is the first few years where you're going, hearts and minds, and Neil's at the farm table explaining and going. And now we've got that sort of traction that's allowing us to just go to independent ag retailers. That pull in the market is there, and we're there to fulfill that need. Still blocking and tackling for ourselves, educating the retailers and their agronomists, but we're definitely making progress there. Next slide. So now we want to turn our attention to the expansion, and I would ask you all take a look at the press release we put out a couple of days ago. We've got 3 facilities that we're going to talk about today. The first is the pilot facility, the demonstration facility in Bicycle, Alberta. It's basically the blue building that you can see there. There's actually an addition at the back we put in last year. We did some upgrades in late 2021 that allow us to be adding capacity in 2022. That site really has all the pots and pans that we're used to, and that we've been able to make work. So it helps us understand what we're going to be scaling, and it provides a clear demonstration for folks that want to see it, and allows us to get product in for field trials. That's been an important part to us. The next slide, please. As we look to scale up, we're looking at our facility in DeBolt. Again, we already operate a blending site where we've been selling into that region. We've got an offtake with an existing partner there to take the demand from that, and we've already established our presence. And that Peace region of Alberta, for those that aren't familiar, the only way to get to it is to come up through Edmonton, and so all the fertilizer or transportation heavy to get into that region. So being up there allows us to sort of work with what might otherwise be considered a more captive market or hard to reach market. The future state for us there is 50,000 metric tons of additional capacity online, ideally by the end of or middle to late of next year, and that would be a doubling of our business in terms of production capacity across blended and across all products, and it would be a 2.5 times scale up of our granulated products. We've already got our development permit approval. We already own the land. We've already got the building in place. So, pardon me, we do have some work that we need to do to get there, but we should be doing the majority of our construction that needs to get done before the snow flies this year in order to hit the 2023 growing seasons. Next slide, please. Just a bigger project, 200,000 metric tons at the K+S facility. You'll see the pink building here. You can just see to the right of the wheat there, you can see the conveyors for taking the product from their processing plant up to the train. And when they do that, the byproduct comes back down, and you can see this little plume here just to the south end of that pink building. That's where they're currently loading that potash back into trucks and driving it around and putting it back into the process to try and recycle it. That, of course, decreases their operational efficiency. Our project location is this laydown yard here to the east of the property, where it's already a disturbed site. So we've got a road access to it, and we'll be able to put in 200,000 expandable beyond that of granulation capacity. Massive increase in our production volume, and at a $500 cost, which is actually under what we currently charge, but an average cost across that, that's $100 million to our run rate from a revenue perspective. So quite the project. The DeBolt project to be about $25 million worth of additional value. Like I said, there's some projects that K+S is doing to debottleneck their plant to make that product available for us, and us in turn taking that product allows them to debottleneck the facility. Only tricky thing is we're on their site, and that's caused us to do a bit more work with them to make sure that we have our roles and responsibilities and shared services pieces together. But it's proving to be quite a productive and relationship for us all.
Hey Keith, can I interject just for a second?
Please.
On this one? Yeah, so just had a question regarding Canpotex. So there's obviously a few people on this call that understand the world of potash in Western Canada. Just a quick overview, and I won't get very long on it, but Canpotex is the marketing arm of potash for both Nutrien and Mosaic out of Saskatchewan. All the product that they actually do that, basically all the product that actually goes with that is basically has to go through Canpotex. The reason we're working with K+S, and the reason this is such a really cool synergy, is they haven't opted out of that end of things. So we work with specifically K+S and their overall distribution network, and hence the reason it's been a great advantage to us. So that was all I wanted to say on the side of that, because it's one of those things that people are trying to understand.
Perfect. Okay, next slide, please, Carrie. So as we look at growth, this year was getting Bicycle expansion online. Next year will be DeBolt. The year after, the Bethune expansion comes in. The Bethune expansion really doesn't hit until the beginning of 2025, but we'll catch maybe the tail end of 2024. So we've indicated it there. You see the revenue growth potential. Obviously, those revenues move with fertilizer price, but given the geopolitical scenarios that are playing out here and the shortages of supply, we don't really see that moving. But in fact, our gross margin should remain the same in that 25 to 30% range at the price as we move forward. So we're fairly well insulated against fluctuations in those price. Our plan is to build capacity. We've only talked about the projects that we have actively in the ground, but as I mentioned earlier, we've got projects in places like Colorado, Idaho, and Southern Alberta that we're developing in behind that to create a funnel to get us to basically a 10x on growth over the next 4 or 5 years, which will be important for us in serving the market and managing our customers' expectations for available volumes. Next slide, please. So share price, the outstanding shares. I believe this makes sense. I've seen a number of the websites that don't seem to count the right number of basic shares that are out there, even though it's in all of our disclosures. And so we're working slowly to correct those as we go. But we continue to believe in the company, and management itself owns about 28% of the stock. And if you take the insiders around that, you get to about 40% of the stock is held by management. So we're well incented to see this across the line and to achieve value for all shareholders. Where there's great alignment between shareholders and management in this as we go. I believe that's where we're going to pull it up and move back to Q&A. Neil, any last comments before we go to Q&A with Carrie?
Don't think so.
Great. I've been anxious to see. I've seen some of the questions that are in the chat, but there's also in the Q&A. Carrie, do you want to lead us through some questions that we can answer?
Perfect. Sounds good. Thanks everyone for your patience. I'll try and get to the ones that I didn't get to in the chat in this Q&A session now. For our first question, I'll throw it over to you, Keith. Why is Q4 21 revenue up 700% over Q4 of 20?
There's a couple of reasons for that. Really, it's the pace of Q4 is our biggest season as we grow. We sell the majority of our product in Q4. We were blessed last year with a particularly long season after the harvest before the snow started to fly, and that was great. We were also there, the price of fertilizer products was moving up, so our gross revenue looked to increase. And we were seeing quite a bit of adoption where there was shortages in the market of other products, and therefore there was much higher trialing. So the two impacts of higher prices are, one, there's higher revenue. On the other side, farmers are looking for alternatives because you're looking at trial opportunities where, especially now that we've got more results out showing equivalent performance, but with the plus of no salt, or I should say the lack of salt and the addition of the carbon that goes with it.
Great. Thank you, Keith. A question I'll pass over to Neil. Is there any input product that is constrained and can limit your growth?
Is there, what's that, sorry?
And what of our feedstock products are constrained and could they limit our growth? So I think there's the question around.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, so there was a question in the chat there regarding, hey, what if Fertaz goes the wrong direction, for instance? And what's good about what we've been trialing and dealing with over the years is I've done everything from, the whole team being Kevin and myself and Elston have all been playing with different types of phosphate rock. So we've used Moroccan rock that OCP produces. We've used Algerian rock. We've used product in Northern Ontario. So what we've been able to do is understand that the different rocks do react differently, but we also have access to these. And that's what's really interesting. The reason we're really working a lot with Fertaz, in particular in Western Canada, is they have a mine site in Fernie, BC, and also up in the Wapiti area of the Peace Country. So that all becomes very synergistic to decreased, obviously decreased logistics, and just more the story of, hey, this is really cool that we're doing it local and in our backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Neil. Another question from the audience. There's a lot of questions around margin on blended versus the granulated, and how the margin is impacted if we go into using the independent retail network.
Sure. So the granulated product that we sell, we get more revenue for two reasons. One, the granulated product moves into the supply chain through existing channels. So there's no need for someone to go out and spread it. Therefore, we can charge more because there isn't this other cost to application. So that's there. It also, the margin that we get, that granulated product does trade at a premium to the blended products because of its ease of handling, the ability to move it throughout the year, and the ability to have it available at the right times for the customer. Whereas the blended business is much more of a just-in-time business, really spring and to a small degree and to the majority of fall. So for our side, granulated has two benefits. One is a higher value product that fits better for more conventional farmers, gives us access to more acres. And the other advantage is it allows us to sell that product more consistently through the year to even out revenues across the year as we are able to move it as we sell it through the various production cycles.
Excellent, Keith. Thank you. There's a question about the valuation metrics that our company should trade at. I realize that's a tough one to answer, so I'll just suggest that that's a tough one for us to answer.
Roll the dice.
Sure. No,
Yeah.
so we have conversations with a number of research analysts. The best regression models I've seen put us at a 4x on sales would be the right metric, and part of that's tied to a challenge in the market. Is there's not a lot of publicly traded companies in ag that have a similar profile to us. The other guys are the Nutrients and the Mosaics. They're not growing very fast on a volume basis, except by acquisition. And then there's a bunch of folks that are early stage. And so I would say that the analysis for us is there. What that tells us is that most of the guys that were in our space were taken private. People went out to unlock that value. And so for me, that implies that there's significant value left for us. At 15 million last year and 25 this coming year, we see considerable amount of value. And as we keep bringing on these projects, we expect to see our margin continue, and therefore the return to shareholders remaining attractive.
Great, thanks, Keith. Another question, what's the key to greater US sales? Is this something we want to focus on more right now?
I can hop in on that
please.
one. So the key to greater U.S. sales, and we've already been doing it, is back into the thought process of seeding areas. So getting people used to it, trialing it, and then basically being 2 to 3 years ahead of when we can actually physically get down there as a investment and everything else. So what we've done is we've actually identified and am working with one of the largest independent distributors in the US. And what they do is they actually, and what's really fun with them is since they're so big, they're kind of the gatekeeper to all these new technologies. And there's three guys in that company that all they do is vet different technologies, being from some kind of bioactive whatever over to some fairy dust over here. But we came into them with our product, they vetted it, and then started stalking us. Becoming one of those things where it was more than just a opportunity for them. So what was interesting is their whole team showed up here in Bicycle to look at our process, understand more, how do we keep the microbial action going? What are we doing on all this, obviously with NDAs? And we were able to convince them quite easily to do a whack of trials on corn, soy, cotton, everything this year. So what is the key to the bigger US sales? Folks like them. They're sitting in there, they want to, they've already started the trials. As we grow and have more available product to send them, we're just going to increase the trials to becoming more of a commercial side, and away we go.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Neil. A question on the financial target having been changed from 100 million revenue by the end of 23 to 125 by the end of 25.
Yeah, there's a couple pieces that go with that. So the ability for us to source equipment has been a challenge. And so what we've done is actually moved forward the DeBolt project so that we could continue the growth, as opposed to doing one big step change and little ones afterwards with a high risk profile. We've switched that around to be a lower risk profile, where we go and do the 50,000 metric ton project now. The 200,000 ton project comes a little bit later. If you receive the 2026, you'll see the full Bethune come online, and that goes up there. We still maintain that 25 to 30% gross margin, and we still see an EBITDA goal in that range of about 20%. So those financial metrics remain the same. We've just de-risked the model a little bit by pushing out the Bethune project because of the complexity of getting all that equipment over from Europe at this time. We could provide better value and continue to support growth. That Bethune project is actually going to be quite large for us compared to what we would do developing into new markets. So also doing that DeBolt project earlier, 50,000 range, we'd be able to help advance our expansion into the US more quickly. So it's got a strategic component, but there's also the tactical of saying, a big 200,000 ton project in a market where there's this level of uncertainty, it's better for us to do that. The follow-up question to that is, of course, are you going to finance it? And fantastic question. For projects where we are the owner of the site, so our DeBolt project and our Bicycle project, we're able to access the Farm Credit Canada and the AFSC, which is the Alberta Farm Services Corporation, funding that's in the range of 80% non-dilutive. Add on some grants, and we get to this where we're going to see some small equity requirements to drive these things, particularly in the development cost, but we're able to really leverage that to 80+%. The projects where we're leasing, i.e. at K+S, would see us in that range of 65 to 75% leverage. And so for us, we think that's incredibly capital efficient, where the dollars we put in go directly, on an equity basis, the EBITDA is a 1-year payback on equity. And that is fantastic for us in terms of how the project dynamics work out. So we're going to look to do that in measured amounts over time, taking individual project chunks where we can put this capital to use to return to shareholders, to show that direct link between investment and return and enterprise value as we create it.
Thanks, Keith. That's great. Over to the competitive side, who's your biggest competition? Could a Nutrien or Mosaic step in and compete in regenerative ag? Neil, maybe I'll throw that at you.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. They could. They're already starting to play with it. We have to understand the whole philosophy that I was mentioning before is they have these billion-dollar infrastructure facilities that play with chemistry, not biochemistry. So it's not that they can't figure it out, but we do have a variety of products and proprietary knowledge that are, really does overstep what they're doing right now. When you're talking 200,000 tons, we'd be more of a bolt on to something, and instead of being a competitor, I think they'd probably rather just take us out, and that's probably our overall scheme as life goes on, right? But at the end of the day, we have this proprietary knowledge, and just keeping bugs alive from chemists is always an interesting game.
For sure.
Great. Question about the average plant. What size of geographical area can one of our plants serve? How far apart to cover the Canadian geography and then into the US?
Yeah, I'll take that question, and I'll just finish up one point that I'll come back to the point I was making. But the geographical area, it really is defined by its miles. It's how many miles are we shipping the ingredients. So we're really looking at putting production sites where the source of the ingredients are, so that we can be shipping finished product where the value per mile is better for us to ship that finished product out. So we're looking at places like the potash in North America comes from Saskatchewan. Rock phos comes from all up and down the Rockies. There's spots all the way down, or most of the way down. And so we're looking at putting those plants. The bigger the plant, the further we have to ship those nutrients. But in effect, those nutrients are still being shipped that in conventional, because the other folks have invested in all this infrastructure, and they're having to ship that product that way. So the transportation miles, we're trying to align our facilities with that supply chain so that we don't have a disadvantage, and we may in some cases have an advantage, like in the Peace River, around that application. The point I wanted to add to Neil's on the last question was, everybody thinks, oh, well, Nutrien and Mosaic come in and make our products. Well, frankly, their products and our products are made in two so dramatically different ways. Theirs is a chemistry experiment. Ours is a blending and granulating experiment, so or methodology. So there's not really this worry that they could immediately swap out their infrastructure and deploy in our manner as well. So we do have that moat around our business as well. Sorry, Carrie.
Excellent. A question about the utilization of dried manure after Replenish becomes the overall brand. Will there be an EarthRenew product?
So the EarthRenew product for the dried manure doesn't really fit at the present in terms of an opportunity that has hit the same investment hurdles that the other Replenish products have. That's not to say that we're turning our back on that as a business. We still own the patents, and we're looking at some licensing opportunities, particularly to those in the biodigester world who could make use of them. But for now, our return on capital invested is much higher in upcycling these, mushroom composts and other composts, as well as the mineral fertilizer components that we find. And so just from a capital efficiency perspective, we're really focused on that. Plus the technology risk is a bit lower. So we're looking at options to put those projects in behind, but every time we look at them, they come up significantly behind from a risk and a reward basis as compared to expanding the Replenish Nutrients footprint.
Excellent. Thank you, Keith. Oh, sorry, did you have another?
Nope.
No. Okay. Question for Neil. When can a producer expect to see a difference if they started using this product?
Yeah, nutrients, quite interesting. So if you go over to Home Depot and you buy a bag of Scott's Turf Builder, it's usually fairly high in nitrogen. That's what we know. It'll grow some green. We see a reaction. When we're talking mineral fertilizers of phosphorus and sulfur and potash, generally these deficiencies are a long-term side of it all, and it takes a substantial amount of time to turn the corner on building that soil and creating a better soil and healthier soil. Now, what's interesting about that is you'll have, year one, for instance, you put it down and have, say, a baseline of 1 million microbes per gram. And I'm just using that number as argument's sake. So you have this baseline that starts with there. What's neat that we've been able to do and see a difference is we're working with a company down in California that actually measures our microbe population, and we can actually physically see that little bit of a difference happening after our application rate. So year two on that same chunk of land, now I've gone from the baseline of 1 million microbes to 100 million microbes. We keep going on there. Suddenly I'm starting to get earthworms that are starting to happen and things like that, and everything else that's starting to go that's related to soil health. And so then year three, we move from that baseline of 100 million to 1 trillion. And that's when we know we're really gaining on things, and so on and so forth. In the case of, and that's interesting, I have my own chunk of land that I play with just outside of Strathmore. And we've been doing trials on it for the last 3 years. This is going to be our 4th year. Year one, we didn't see anything different. Right from a check of 0 phosphorus to our treatments to normal synthetic. And we went, okay, what was going on there? Obviously we don't need phosphorus, which is wrong. So went into year 2 and same thing, go and do this thing, and didn't see a difference in things except a little bit of change in the way the soil tilth was coming. And then they was starting to go, okay, we're probably going to get somewhere. Year 3, which was last year, and if I can share screen for just 2 seconds, I'm going to inundate the people here for just 2 seconds with a picture. But year 3, maybe it doesn't want to work for me. I ended up growing a barley crop there, which basically had same thing, where we're growing 120 bushel barley crop on the whole thing, but where it ended up changing in difference is you'll see these really, really green strips being on the one edge and the other side. If you're seeing, can you see that, Carrie?
No, we can't. If you want to just drop it in the chat, I could throw it up.
Okay, well, no bother. I'm going to just confuse people. But ultimately, then what you have is you have 2 green strips where it was missing. And phosphorus deficiency 100% relates to maturity in grains. And that product in our check, where we hadn't been doing phosphorus for a whole bunch of years, was physically about 12 days behind in maturity. And in the world of Canada, where we have all of about 100 frost-free days, that's a problem. It changes from being a good malt barley that's going to end up in our beer to being a frozen feed barley that ends up in the cow. So it depends on which way you go, but it is a wholly different in price, and it's a problem. So when we're doing this, back to the main question is, when do we see a thing? It's a 2 to 3 year commitment by producers. They understand it. We're to be able to now, with these biology partners down in California, measure and show people that they're gaining, and they're able to stay on that path.
Yeah, just to add to that, it may take 2 or 3 years to show them the difference, the incremental difference, but it's not like they're losing in the interim. They're still on par in those other years as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. How are you positioned to be a leader in ESG?
So the ESG, particularly as it relates to agriculture, is what is your impact? How are you improving? And for us, we measure that in 2 ways. One is our production methodology is lower on intensity than our competitors. So we are what we call long carbon. So we don't really have any negative impact from carbon tax. We use the dryer a little bit to harden our pellets, but we do it at such a low temperature that we don't end up using a lot of natural gas in that regards, compared to those on the chemical reaction side who are using immense amounts of energy in their production processes. So our intent is to be lower GHG per ton of product, per ton of nutrient put on the field, and we're clearly on our way there. The flip of that then is also to support farmers in their regenerative practices. Regenerative practices correlate to higher carbon in the soil. More carbon in the soil means more sequestered. So for the farmer, they see more value. The more organic carbon you have in your soil, the more valuable your farm is, because it's got more growing potential. And so we're seeing that in 2 different ways. We're actually putting ESG into practice by saying, yes, if we produce a better product with more carbon, we get the same amount of nutrients in the land, but when we leave that land, it's actually in better shape, and it's more valuable over time. So we look at it from that perspective on the ESG side. And then fundamentally, our products, upcycling nutrients, we're taking products that may otherwise not find their highest value and helping them up the value chain. So that works for us. That works for our products.
Thanks, Keith. Over to you, Neil. What do people really need to understand about your space, about the market we serve?
As far as investors or as far as farmers?
Investors, I think, was the angle here.
There you go. Fair enough. I think what they need to understand is that our space is growing. It's not something that's going to get just segued into just an organic side that's only achievable by 6 people. We have regenerative farming is the buzzword across the way. As I said a little bit earlier, it was about 5 years ago where I really saw the switch flip from the producers I was seeing, that all of a sudden their minds went into, hey, I need to really start protecting the soil for my future and for my kids' future. And, that was ultimately the first time I heard that. Whereas, hey, I just need now, and I need it now, and I need it now. I'm not too worried about 3 years from now. And so as that switch has been flipping, and it's, and the main reason being is we're getting a demographic change in the farming side, where you have this, most guys who have been at it that are 65, 70 years old, starting to move. The guys who are younger now, this next generation, these 30 to 45, 50-year-old guys are in there and going, oh man, this is a lot of fun. It's back into being fun being a farmer. And so that's, I think, what we need to know about the space.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Neil. Why is the K+S relationship so strategic?
Well, so K+S, when they export their product, somewhere between 5 and 10% of that product has to be recycled, that byproduct. And that's the byproduct that we can take. So if you can imagine any process where you have to put back 5 to 10% back to the start of the process, has a negative influence on their energy efficiency, on their throughput for their facility and their ability to grow. So us taking that product out from them helps them increase the overall efficiency and the extraction of the potash that they're focused on into their core markets. So for us, it's great because we have no logistics. It's across you saw the parking lot, we're just sort of across the parking lot in terms of delivery. And for those products, anywhere between 50 and 58% of our products that come from that one material that doesn't really have a transportation impact. So for us, it's great. We're operating a site where potash is known. There's already all the ancillary services are on site. It's been developed. It's a sort of a brownfield development for us. For them, it debottlenecks their process, allows them to increase their production, and allows them to increase their output most predominantly. And that allows them to capitalize on the capital investment they made, the $4 billion they put into that mine over the last number of years. So that's why that's particularly advantageous. Sorry.
Thank you. Northern Alberta seems to be the market you're expanding into. Why did you choose that market?
The Northern Montana market?
No, the Northern
Alberta.
Northern Alberta market. Oh, there we go. So the Northern Alberta market on that end of things is physically the most expensive fertilizer in North America. I mean, it's the hardest to get to logistically. All the production plants through North America have a long ways to go up there, and it's just kind of become that lost sister, that long lost sister-in-law, or whatever it happens to be, that's way up in the north. So for us, it actually worked on a couple side of it all. Is a lot of the clients that we deal with are Hutterites, and the Hutterite colonies are one of these philosophy guys that have understood that, hey, it's for the next generation and the next generation. So they really do appreciate what we're trying to accomplish. And on the other side of it all is that footprint of seeding, we've been doing it now for the last 4 or 5 years up there, via different products, and in particular Replenish ones since about 4 years ago. And where it really kind of came to fruition on us expanding is, of course, all the elemental sulfur comes out of the oil patch. And one of our synergistic sides of that, of course, we have no logistics out of being there because that's right there. On the other side, the Fertaz new mine is in the Peace Country. So we now have 2 out of my 3 main ingredients are physically right in that backyard. So we're a made in Northern Alberta solution, so we can win the logistics game and then take advantage of that heavier margin.
Excellent. Okay, and I think we have time for one more question here. The question is, what is your main differentiator as an investment?
Go ahead, Keith.
Oh, so the main differentiator is investment. There are very few ways to participate in the ag sector, in the fertilizer space specifically, that don't carry a negative ESG component. Nutrien and Mosaic are, as I said, carbon short, and we're carbon long. There's also not a lot of businesses in this space that are not tied to commodity price. So Nutrien's at a high right now. As ammonia prices or urea prices come down, they'll see their share price move accordingly. And so there's quite a bit of commodity risk there. Whereas for us, we're more driven by the consistent margin. So for us, we offer exposure to that market on the ESG side without the same sort of commodity exposure, which is great when you're at the top of the market. Nobody wants commodity exposure because you know it's going to go down over time. Whereas we're going to be okay as the inevitable boom and bust, the 7-year cycle of fertilizers the drum continues to beat on. So we think we're particularly unique. Also the pace of growth, 200% growth year over year that we'll continue to average between now and our once Bethune's out, and see what projects come in along that time offers a pretty substantial opportunity for us, particularly given that we've got partners that are going to help us expand those markets into new geographies over time. So we're really building a path to what should be quite a good future for the organization.
Excellent. That concludes our Q&A section. Keith or Neil, if you have any final comments, now would be the time.
Sure. So one theme that I've seen a couple of questions come up on, and I'll speak to it, which is about the dilutive financing requirements as we go. And I would suggest that I think I dealt with it the opposite, which is I answered based on the non-dilutive fund. So the inverse of that is we're going to need somewhere between call it 15 and 25% of the capex of these projects as we move forward. The advantage is our EBITDA margin on those projects is 20%. So the non-dilutive financing is really 1-to-1 or 1 to 1.5 on what our EBITDA creation would be. And that's a metric we feel quite comfortable with. That means that any dilutive financing that we need to do is more accretive than where we're headed to. So as far as final messages, maybe I'll let Neil go, and then I'll go last, Neil.
As far as the final message, I'm out there day in, day out, deal with producers all year. What's fun is the fact that this is fun. We've been sitting in here, we're making a product that people appreciate and want. And what's really interesting is I can go dig in the soil. I can show them that I have a healthier soil just by all the earthworm action and everything else that happens, the bigger root mass. I see people's eyes get bigger. And at the end of the day, we have a product that works, and it works well. I think that's what I've got.
Yeah, I think I'm really proud of the team we built in the last year and the success we've seen. The acquisition of Replenish really did change the trajectory of the merger with Replenish really changed the trajectory for EarthRenew and where we're at, and we now have a very clear path to what our growth looks like. And I'm proud of the team for doing that, and I'm thankful to the investors, those on the call and otherwise who have backed us in this, and I look for their continued strong support as we grow the business.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating, and you may disconnect at this time.